Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, ciao, bonjour, namaste, jumbo, bienvenidos. Hey, my name is Jedley. Welcome to Reading with Your Kids. We're coming to you from the beautiful, wonderful, historical neighborhood of Reedville, located in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We're so very honored and so wicked happy that you're joining us in our mission to help all families grow closer through reading. We do that by sharing fun, thoughtful, and thought-provoking conversations with fascinating people who just happen to be writing books for kids of all ages. You can join us in our mission by telling all of your family and friends about the show and letting them know that they can hear us on the WREB AM/FM 24/7 radio network, and they can find us on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Apple, Good Pods, Podcast Addict, Amazon Music, Castbox, Player FM, wherever you find your favorite shows. Wonderful guests coming your way today. First up, Katie Shooltz will be here to celebrate Kate the Earthling. Kate is an amazing author and also a biophilic living advocate. Later on in the show, we'll be meeting Becky Bell, celebrating the Gnomes of Fibberton. This episode of Reading with Your Kids is brought to you by We're Going to the Dinosaur Forest, written by Marie Nichols. Marie Nichols was recently on my Connecticut Book Festival's podcast, and what a delightful woman. One of the things she said really struck home with me. She said, parents nurture with care, siblings are taught to share, but grandparents embrace the dares. We're Going to the Dinosaur Forest is a colorful, fun-filled book where this grandmother dares to embark on a wild journey with her grandson into the dinosaur forest. It's available on Amazon. It's also available on bookshop.org. You and your kids and you and your grandkids are going to love this book. It's We're Going to the Dinosaur Forest, written by Marie Nichols. Hey families, would you like to share a miracle with your kids? At the Wolf Conservation Center, hope was fading. The endangered Mexican wolves dreamed of a pup, but none had come. Until one tiny miracle changed everything. Meet Trumpet, a real-life wolf pup whose incredible birth brought joy, hope, and a lesson in conservation. Trumpet the Miracle Wolf, written by Leocadia George, is a heartwarming true story that will inspire your whole family. Teach your kids the power of hope, love, and protecting endangered species. Get your copy today and join the wild adventure. My friends, I think we are going to have a fantastic time this afternoon. Our guest is very, very happy. Her team is on the verge of being a champion. She's here to celebrate. Her new picture book is called Kate the Earthling. Please welcome to the show, Kate Shooltz. Hey, Kate, how are you?
Hello, I'm so wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Delighted to have you on. Philadelphia is one of those places. When I started my career doing educational magic shows, Philly and South Jersey were really was the first market outside of New England that kind of embraced me, and so I did a lot of work down there in the city and then around the suburbs. So it's near and dear to my heart.
That's amazing. I didn't know that you had a magical background.
Yes. There are lots of things that are magical, including my time on stage. A lot of magical things happened to me, which was really a lot of fun. When you, as an author, I'm sure you do school visits. A lot of our listeners are authors or aspiring authors. And first off, I always really appreciated the fact that schools that are so pressed for time would take the time out of their day, 45 minutes, an hour, hour and a half between getting the kids in and out of the auditorium, to take that time to bring their kids to see me and let me be with them. And I was always very cognizant of that. So I hope other authors, when you're doing school visits, realize that school time is precious in a school, and they're giving you a big chunk of it. And so really appreciate that. And
yeah,
really magical things can happen when you're interacting with kids in a school.
It's very true. I think it was last week, did a visit with a class, and it was just such a beautiful experience. They were like 8, 9 years old. I think it was a third grade class. And it was interacting with them and reading the story and then kind of talking a little bit deeper about the themes after that was just so special, and hearing their feedback and their, connections with nature, which is the theme of my book, was just very rewarding for me. And I loved that experience. So I'll take it as much as I can get.
So let's make believe our listeners are third graders. What did you tell them about Kate the Earthling?
So Kate the Earthling is, it's a story about a little girl discovering her connection to the earth, and that she is also one of many, many kinds of earthlings. And, because of that, she should care for her planet, which is her home, a shared home. And so we discussed that, and then we kind of went through and talked about their personal feelings in nature and how they each feel when they might be out in a particular spot of nature that they love. And, some of the things that they shared were that they feel peaceful, they feel relieved if they're feeling stressed, things like that, which was so beautiful because that's also how I feel. And one of the reasons that I want more kids to get outside and, reap those benefits of nature. So it was just great to see that little kids are, getting that connection in their own way. And I'm hoping my book is going to help instill that in more of them. So,
yeah. One of the things that we talked about, that we've talked about a lot here on the podcast, is the fact the kids don't have the chance to do probably what you and I were able to do when we were young, which is to just go and get lost in nature. Even if you're living, I grew up in the city, but there were patches of green and nature, usually that we weren't supposed to be in. But you could get in and you could look for bugs and look for snails and all these other kind of things, where it's not the same as going out in nature with a class, with a group. It's just not the same. When you go out there by yourself and you're mucking around and just exploring, it's a very different experience, and I don't think kids get a chance to do that these days.
I totally agree. I mean, I feel very happy that I grew up probably in the last generation of kids that didn't have really the internet and cell phones very young. Cell phones were getting more common as soon as I started driving. So when I was really young, I spent so much time out in the woods, and all of my houses had some kind of woods or creek or something in the vicinity. And yeah, I would go out there all the time, and that was a place for me that was very magical. It was like instilling this sense of curiosity in me from a very young age, and wonder, and a sense of peacefulness there that really, really stuck with me in a way that I don't think I really thought about until I was much older. Like, why did I feel that way there? And why is that important to me now as an adult? So, being that kids today don't necessarily have that as much, that was a huge reason I wanted to write this book, so that they can maybe think more about that, and maybe they don't spend a lot of time out in nature, whatever their circumstance may be, but this book might make them more curious to do that. Or, ask their parents, can we go outside? Or maybe they'll look down at the ground more when they're out there and notice little things that are growing, a mushroom or whatever it is, and feel a curiosity. So I think that's so important for so many reasons, and that's my goal. So
yeah. Was there one moment or one place in nature where you became really aware that I just have this connection with this beautiful thing I call the earth?
I mean, I think as an adult, I can pinpoint that. So, like I said, I spent a lot of time in nature as a kid. Then I got older. I got into life. And when I went to college, when I went to graduate school, I went out in Salt Lake City, and I started to get much more into hiking there. And that kind of, I think, reactivated that in me in a sense. And I just became in love with that as my hobby. And that really is my hobby now, is hiking or just being out in any kind of landscape. But when I started to feel that deeper connection as an adult. And I was looking more into that and the concept of feeling connected to nature, which is biophilia, the love of life, love of natural systems. I kind of brought that back to little me and that time I was outside so much, and that it, gave me like a comfort as a child, and I felt at peace there. And to me, that was because I felt like I was at home in this quiet, beautiful earth, and that just was in me all my life. And as an adult, I kind of recognized it. So I recognized it, I think, at two different points in life, and then I connected them as an adult, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. Boy, you're talking about being out in Salt Lake City in Utah. I had an epic cross-continent adventure a couple of years ago, right before the pandemic. Yeah. I drove from Boston to Orlando to St. Louis to Los Angeles and then back home.
I love that.
On the way back home, went through Utah for the very first time. And there was one point on the interstate that I looked ahead and I saw, I'm going somewhere that I've never been before. And I just picked up the camera, drove real slow, and we're going down in through the rocks. And I'm like, I went through a wormhole. I'm on another planet now.
I love that feeling. Isn't it cool?
It is really cool. I felt that way for most of the West, because I had never driven through the deserts before.
I love the desert.
Yeah.
Incredible. I mean, I love every landscape, and that's the thing. There's so much on the earth to see, from the little tiniest thing in your own backyard to going to these crazy desolate areas. You can never get tired of exploring it and finding something new and really fascinating. And the best part is that you're a part of it all, which is what I love so much.
Yeah. So on your website, it says that you're a biophilic living advocate. You got to tell me what that is.
So, yes. So, okay. While I was in Salt Lake City, I was there studying real estate development and, which is building buildings and cities. And I took a elective called Green Communities, which I loved because I was already loving nature. And this class introduced me to something called biophilia, which is the concept of humans feeling this like innate deep connection to nature. And, that's because as a species, we grew up in nature. That's where we became what we are now. And so it's natural that we would feel so drawn to it and comforted by it, even as we've modernized, Mm-hmm. And I felt so just amazed by that concept because it was like putting a word to how I had always felt my whole life, like a reason, and that other people felt this like weird, deep connection to nature. And I understood like, oh, okay, this isn't just me. And that went deeper to kind of describe biophilic design, which is incorporating nature into our daily lives through, buildings, which I just gravitated towards immediately. I loved that idea. So to me, a biophilic life is incorporating nature into your life as much as you can, and in so many different ways. That could be through bringing nature into your home with plants or different kinds of artwork, which is something that I also do, is create biophilic artwork. Or you could, incorporate different textures into your home or just have a view to nature. So there's lots of different elements to biophilic design itself, but biophilic living to me is trying to just live, in harmony with nature, if you want to call it that way, as much as you can, and appreciating it, spending time with it, connecting with it. And I think it just has numerous benefits to us.
Yeah. I was in Milan, Italy, back in March of last year, and one of the buildings that we saw was it was beautiful, but it had things growing out of it like everywhere, and it was really hard to see where the building started and the plants ended, or vice versa. And it just looked so cool.
I think I know exactly what building you're talking about because I've looked at so many buildings like that. And really, I think a lot of European and South American countries have a lot of buildings like that have plants like attached to them or incorporated into the design. And I think that's largely because of the climates, but it's so cool once you start looking deeper into those kinds of structures. I love it.
Yeah. Well, you know, we've celebrated and really encouraged families to get their kids out into nature and to help their kids develop a love of nature. We are, you know, my studios is within the city limits of Boston, but we are as far from downtown Boston as you can be and still be within the city limits. And in fact, my fence is the city limit, and on the other side of it is a wildlife sanctuary. Yeah. So we're very, very blessed. My kids grew up and able to go out and play in our big, huge backyard, and we were able to sit underneath this big, giant oak tree and read books together and look up and imagine all and think about all the creatures that were calling that tree home. And so I just feel so blessed that my kids had that. How could somebody that lives 12 miles closer to downtown here in Boston or in Philadelphia, how can those parents who maybe live in an apartment building and the parents are working a whole lot and they don't have a lot of free time, how can they help their kids develop that love of the earth and nature?
I think that's a really good question because, you know, I also grew up in more of a suburb that, like I said, I always had woods behind me. But now that I live in Philadelphia, I live in the middle of the city and, you know, there's so much concrete here and you can see how there's a lot of people that, you know, have all different lives and means. And you can see there's a lot of kids that probably have very, very little contact with nature in their daily life. And I think, you know, the smallest thing you could do is maybe even just get them a little plant. They can take care of it and just watch it change and watch it grow and just some sort of natural little thing inside the house that they can have a daily experience with and maybe see it grow or something like that. Or get a bird feeder and then you can kind of watch a bird outside of your window, or maybe take one day a month or one day a week and try and go for a walk, drive and go for a walk somewhere else, or learn about the different trees that might be in your neighborhood. So just the tiniest thing to kind of spark that curiosity, I think would be beneficial. And then when you get the time or the chance to have something a little richer or deeper in a forest or wherever, you've got that initial curiosity sparked. You know?
Yeah, I love that idea. I think Kate the Earthling is probably one of those books that we would have wanted to read outside underneath that big oak tree, outside in nature.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea.
I do think it's so important that we just help our kids. And it's good for us, too, to remember that we are part of this beautiful earth and we need to take care of it. And in a lot of ways, we need to let it take care of us, too.
I totally agree. And, you know, one of the things I talked with that class about that I mentioned is that, you know, humans, we are a part of all of this. And the interesting thing about humans is we can have a huge impact on the earth. It can be negative or it can be positive, you know, and so as much as we can understand our connection and our place in this whole thing, hopefully that will have people grow up and have more of a positive than a negative impact because, you know, we're such a unique species on here. But but
so, tell me, Kate the Earthling, is this your debut picture book?
It is. It is. So I mentioned that I'm also an artist, and Kate the Earthling is my artist name, and it has been for like 7 or 8 years. So that's kind of the name of my artist persona or my company, and I have made, you know, plant art for years. And probably 2 years ago, I just randomly was thinking, I think about my childhood, and I thought, Kate the Earthling would be such a cute little character name. And then the story just came to me so quickly once I thought about that. But so this is the first book, but I have many, many ideas of follow-up stories or additional adventures that Kate the Earthling will have. You know, there's so much that you can share about the earth and curiosities, different landscapes. So I really want to grow it into a series of sorts, but this is the debut. So I'm just so happy about it.
I had an interesting conversation just last week. I went to get my eyes checked, one of those new fancy eye labs where there's a human there putting things in front of you, but it's AI doing everything and measuring everything. And so I actually had a chance to have a wonderful conversation with the human, and she is an aspiring songwriter and artist herself. But she's like, it's just, I'm not natural at it. And I feel how you're creating in all of these different mediums and very different mediums. It's not like you're, painting with oil one day and watercolor the next day. You're creating art with plants, and you're writing a story and illustrating and designing things. So that's creativity. How can someone tap into creativity in all these different ways?
It's really interesting because, before I started creating artwork, I never really did that. Like in my life, I was always into music, and, my whole life, my hobby, my creative outlet was singing. I never really was making physical artwork, if that makes sense. And I think for me, all of these different things that I'm doing, they just come from the same motivation. They all are stemming from this thing that I feel deeply passionate about, which is my connection to the earth and wanting to share that with other people and share that they also have that within them, So I think that passion in me is just springing up these different creative outlets. Like, the book was something I never would have ever imagined I would do. It just kind of came up in my brain, while I was thinking about this passion that I have. So I think if somebody finds that, it will drum up a creativity in them, and it just comes out in whatever form it might. I mean, that's the only way that I can describe it for me. So I think for other people, if you find something that you're really inspired by, it's going to manifest in some way, whatever your artistic form may be. And
you reminding me of something one of my favorite guests, Roger LaRocca, shared with us one day, and she said all of her stories start with an emotion. What kind of emotion do I want to express? And that's kind of what I'm hearing from you. You have all this emotion and connection with the earth and a love for the earth that you want to share. And you're finding different ways and different venues, different media to share that passion with.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
That's why. What a great thing for us to teach our kids.
I agree. I definitely feel like it's very important. It has a lot of, branches to it. I think it's really important for kids to learn about that because it affects them. Nature is very healing. It's very comforting. It's a provider, all of those things. So for us personally to have that connection is really beautiful and really beneficial. But then in turn, if you have that connection, it's going to be beneficial for the earth and all these other plants, animals, everything. So it really is like a full circle of benefits if you get that into you. So
I think so. And one of the things we talk about here a lot is one of the saddest days, and it came right at the end of something really wonderful. My daughter, when she was much, much younger, she would come out on tour with me and sing. And there was one season where she said, there's this other girl that was in the musical with me, and can she come out to do a couple of shows with us? And I said, sure. So I had somebody who knows about singing, because I didn't come in and work with the girls, and he was very impressed. And at the end of the rehearsal, both he and I were very complimentary. And my daughter's friend turned to us and said, "Do you think maybe I'll be famous someday?" And I said, "That's the last thing you should be wanting to do."
I know.
So instead of that, if we could help our kids say, what are you passionate about? What do you love? And then start from there. Okay, figure out a way that you can turn that love and share that love with others. Boy, what a fulfilling life kids.
It really, really is. And it's interesting because when I was in school studying real estate development, that was kind of a path that I had chosen for various reasons. But it was through that I discovered biophilia and the whole concept of biophilic design, which I was never thinking was going to happen to me going to study real estate development. And that completely shifted my life path, like in that moment, that day, and it led me down this journey that I've been on the last 8 or 9 years with my artwork and now this book that has been just the best. And it's just fun because I get to, a lot of times work one-on-one with a client, and that's just such a special process of sharing something that we both are loving. And now with the book, meeting with these kids and just having a conversation with them. And that is just a really beautiful thing. And it's all just for me about like connection, whatever that is, finding something that you're passionate about, and it creates connections with other people. And that's just a really wonderful thing if you find it, and I hope everybody does.
I'm really curious about your artwork. What's the most recent biophilic art that you created?
Oh, the most recent? I mean, so I'm doing them usually like all throughout the year, almost pretty much full time. So the last thing I did was a few weeks ago, I installed something in Colorado that is inside of a spa. So it's just a big moss wall. When you come in, it's just moss and ferns and really beautiful. So mostly I've been working with moss and plants and greenery for the last several years, but I just actually returned from the desert, as we were saying. We love the desert. And I felt very inspired there by things that were not green at all. So I'm going to start, working with some new materials this year to kind of, branch out a little bit, but continuing to work with plants because they're beautiful. But I have been feeling inspired by so much more than plants recently. So I'm excited to see where that goes. But
well, I know that people are curious. They're curious about Kate the Earthling, the picture book. They're curious about Kate the Earthling, the artist, and some of your art. So where can people go to find out more about everything that you're doing?
So if you go to katetheearthling.com, that's kind of the catch-all. So that's my website for my artwork. You can see all of my artwork on there I've ever made, my full portfolio. And then there's a page dedicated to the book there. You can read about the book, read some reviews, read about me as an author. And you can also order the book through my own website, katetheearthling.com. If you do order it through there, I can sign it. I can write a little note to your little Earthling that you're going to read it to if you like. But you can also get it on Amazon, bookshop.org, anywhere online really. But those ones won't come directly from me, so I won't sign it. So if you don't really care about that, that's fine. But
and you probably can't get the Amazon driver to sign. Well, you might be able to, but
you could, but it'll be a forged Kate the Earthling signature.
We've had a great time speaking to the author and illustrator of Kate the Earthling. Our guest has been Kate Shooltz.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for being with us.
I appreciate your time so much, and I loved our chat. So thank you, Jed.
This episode of Reading with Your Kids is brought to you by Woofy and the Dinosaur Adventures, delightful children's book written by Helen Rogerson. Woofy awakens suddenly to a feeling that his friend Bun needs him. When he arrives at the place his nose leads him, Woofy is confused and doesn't find Bun right away. Then a shout from above leads to an amazing experience as he puts his paleontology skills to work. Together, he, Bun, and a cat that hangs around the site wrap up a wonderful adventure involving a T-Rex skull and a very cool twist of an ending. The story is told in a lyrical style that incorporates actual fossil hunting concepts and vocabulary. If you like dinosaurs, friends who help, and adventures, you will love this book. You can check out Woofy and the Dinosaur Adventures and all the Woofy books at unpackyourownhappy.com. Join us right now from the beautiful state of Virginia. Our guest is here today to celebrate her picture book. It's called The Gnomes of Fibberton. Please welcome to the show, Becky Bell. Hey, Becky, how are you?
I am great. Thank you for having me.
Delighted to have you on. Becky and I, we probably should have pushed record a while ago. We just had a great 10 minutes of chatting about the South and the North and all sorts of caves and all sorts of wonderful things. Now we get to talk about her book. Tell us about the Gnomes of Fibberton, please.
So, every child is born with a secret number of fibs they can tell before the Gnomes of Fibberton come and take them to live in Fibberton, where they have to do all the chores kids have lied and said they did, but never did. And they have to eat all the vegetables kids lied and said they ate, but never ate. And that is the super brief synopsis of what the Gnomes of Fibberton is about.
Can we reveal how many fibs there are, or does it vary from kid to kid?
It varies. So that is the catch. That's what gets kids thinking. Every child is born with a secret number, different number for each kid. Could be 105 for one kid, could be 202 for another kid. So that's the whole point, right? To keep them like guessing, like, could it be this one? Could it be this one? You know, and it's kind of, allegorical to life, because you never know which decision is going to be like the bad decision that leads you down a wrong path. Mm-hmm. It's different for everybody, right? Sometimes it's a lot sooner in the making bad choices path. And sometimes it takes someone, can amaze you with how many bad choices they can make and still be.
Well, that certainly is true. And I was going to make a joke about, the number of fibs being arbitrary is not equitable at all. But you're right, because life isn't equitable. I remember, as a teenager and a middle schooler, doing one bad thing wrong and getting caught at it. And meanwhile, there are my classmates that they're doing nothing but bad choices and they never get caught.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It can be that number is different for everybody. You never know, like you said, when you're going to get caught, or when, and it's not just, not just with lying, is all kinds of bad choices in life, bad decisions you can make. And when you make that one bad decision, it can go down that wrong path and you can get stuck there, and you could be stuck in Fibberton.
Yeah. I'm noticing through the magic of technology, I'm looking into Becky's, it looks like her living room, and there's some things there that make me believe that you have a young one in your life. Was there something going on in the family that inspired this book?
So the idea for the book actually came about like 10 years ago, before I even had children. Oh. I was around, it was Christmas time, and I had a niece that was fibbing. She was making up some things, and her mom was complaining that she had not been telling the truth a lot lately. So I came up with this idea that there are little gnomes, and they're all around, and they're hiding, and you don't know where they are, and they listen to you. And if you tell lies, they're keeping track, and they're counting how many lies you tell. And when you hit a secret number, they'll take you away to live in Fibberton, where life is so boring and awful, and you have to do chores and eat vegetables, and all the chairs are broken, all the toys are broken. It's hot, you're sweaty, right? Like Fibberton is not a fun place to go be. But the inspiration actually came from a niece. But then I have an 8-year-old, I have a 4-year-old, and I have an almost 1-year-old. Right now. So,
and certainly that's one of the issues that you must be dealing with from time to time.
Sometimes, yes, we do deal with honesty sometimes. I've told the stories to my own kids through the years, and their friends, when they, having play dates or whatever, and they always would start making little games about the Gnomes of Fibberton, and how they're like, is there a gnome over there? Do you see the gnome? Or they like pretend that they are the gnomes. And after I told the story, a few times, and I saw how it was really piquing kids' interest and how they enjoyed it and like playing, games. They always created little games based on it when I would tell the story. So it's like, I got to actually write this down. And that was kind of the inspiration of finally writing it down.
Okay. So I know maybe they're not listening right now, maybe, but I know there are parents out there, people out there saying, you shouldn't tell your kid that there's a Santa Claus. You shouldn't be lying to your kid. And I imagine that there's someone going to be hearing about this and they're going to be saying, no, this is terrible. You should make kids afraid, and live in fear and lying to these kids about gnomes going to come and take them away. What would you say other than bless your heart to that person?
So I would say, from my own experience, that kids are a lot more resilient than we give them credit for. Mm-hmm. They learn from having their imaginations piqued and not just from lecturing. And that was another like big motivator for me to write this down, was because it piqued curiosity in kids and it made them start thinking, okay, what is a lie? What exactly is this? Am I telling that? Am I being deceptive? And then that kind of, it opens the conversation with mm-hmm. children, and they are, like I said, so much more resilient than we give them credit for. They are not I have not had anyone actually respond like they're afraid to mm-hmm. the story. Kids, I've actually had I've had a few grown-ups that have the response, oh, you don't want to you shouldn't tell your kids that, or, that's kind of dark. But, I definitely think another one of my big motivators too was thinking of like Grimm's fairy tales and Aesop's fables and how those stories were not, they were not tender stories, right? At the end, there is a consequence. Mm-hmm. And I think that's missing from a lot of children's books nowadays. There's not consequences. And I've even heard a lot of different, Aesop's fables or Grimm's fairy tales that are retold differently. Yeah. To take out the actual consequence at the end. And I tried not to do that. I think mine's, if you compare it to Grimm's fairy tale, it's actually it's a lot softer. It's more gentle
than a wolf wanting to eat a kid and,
right.
A baby being on a tree hanging down, it breaks and it falls to the ground. Yeah, the Fibberton is a little bit gentler than that.
Right.
Certainly isn't dark, and your books have all sorts of great color and smiles, and I think you bring up a good point. And I'm looking on your website, and it's not like this is just a crazy idea and you're floating it out there. There are 5 different books available right now.
Well, they're not. So I have the ideas out there. They're not all available yet. The first one, The Gnomes of Fibberton, is out. I have The Tunnel of Truth in the works. So The Tunnel of Truth is the story of redemption of the Gnomes of Fibberton. It's how you get out of Fibberton, is the Tunnel of Truth, right? And the story of the Tunnel of Truth is basically, it's very difficult to tell the truth. So in order to get to the tunnel, you have to go through all these obstacles. You have to accept consequences for what your lies might have been, right? And it's just so that's basically, it's going to be like an adventure of actually getting to the Tunnel of Truth. And once you go through it, you get to go back home and everything is normal, but you have to tell the truth to do that. Yeah. So that's what the second book is about.
It sounds like you're a born storyteller.
Oh, thank you. I do enjoy telling stories and seeing kids' faces light up. Yeah. It's super fun to read at the different libraries, the story, and watch the kids respond. And I will say, for anyone who's timid about the ending being a little scary, I always tell the kids when I'm done reading that the Gnomes of Fibberton are not real, but I put a but. It's super important that you're honest with your parents and always tell them the truth.
Yeah, I agree. This idea of talking to our kids about consequences, I think that's a super important conversation that we have to have with our kids. Our kids need to know that there are certain, every action has a reaction, and sometimes it's good and sometimes it's not so good. Sometimes it's not good for us, and sometimes we make choices that aren't good for others. And so that's why it's important to be thoughtful when we're out in the world.
Right, exactly. The bringing this topic up and speaking about it with kids is so that they will hopefully creatively think a little more and try to soberly think about what's going to happen if I tell this lie, and actually think of the consequences. And do I want to do that? And just throw it out there. And if, a big part of getting your kids to be honest with you is by not freaking out when they do tell you the truth, and just being like, thank you for telling me the truth. There may be a consequence, but personally, I mean, my oldest is 8 now. I do have an older, I adopted through the foster system, who's an adult now, but my experience was in dealing with a kid when they're lying is I almost try to never consequence when they tell me the truth. If they actually fess up, I try everything I can to not consequence them if there's a way to get out of it, because I want them to feel like you can tell me the truth and you're not going to get in trouble. Right. Because there's so much, oh goodness, there's so many opportunities for kids to lie in today's day and age, and opening up the conversation when they're little is so important, because social media, the internet, phones and texting, and just the things they can lie about and hide from their parents now it's a mountain. It's a lot that parents have to deal with and worry about and be concerned about. So that's why I think this book is really good for introducing at a young age, so that parents can try to get their kids to know they can tell them the truth and, open up the conversation.
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it because I'm a little slow, but this conversation about consequences, I think it's super important, and it makes total sense that we can weave it into, hopefully, as we're helping our kids become media literate and social media literate, to help them understand that, you know what? You got somebody messaging you and you're fibbing about it, that you might not want to do that, because you could really get yourself into trouble.
Right. And also opening the conversation of, if the other thing I actually say at the end of a book reading, when I read it in public, I also mention, if someone's trying to get you to keep a secret from your parents, then you need to tell your parents.
Yeah.
It's never a good time to keep a secret. If someone's trying to get you to hide something, that's not good. You should always be honest. But that goes in line with that that happens so much on social media and on the internet, that with children, where people will try to get them not to tell their parents whatever conversation they were having. Right. So it's important. It is an important topic, I think, to especially address when they're young.
I think it's so important. Becky, you're going to think I'm silly, but when I would teach a magic class to kids, I would, the whole thing, oh, I'm teaching you a secret. Don't tell anybody. And I would always end by going, but you absolutely should be telling your parents about it. Whatever I'm teaching you here, you have my permission. In fact, I encourage you to tell your parents. We don't keep secrets from our parents. And I got a lot of grief from other magicians about that, but I'm like, dude, come on. That's the lesson we want kids to know, is to be open and share things with their parents.
Yeah, absolutely. Such an important lesson for kids to learn at a young age, that nothing's really, if somebody, I wish I could go, and maybe it's just me, I wish I could go back to little girl Becky and tell her that, if anyone tries to tell you to keep a secret, then it's not even, I feel like a lot of the time, even within a family, like moms and dads, if a dad or a mom is saying, don't tell your mom or don't tell your dad, that's usually not a good situation, whatever it is. Now, sometimes it's like, don't tell them I got them a present.
Right.
But most of the time, if there's if even like a grandparent or something is saying, don't tell, like it's not really a good reason to be saying, keep this secret from your parents. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. As we're talking about consequences and the consequences from, keeping things from our parents and safety on the internet, do you have any thoughts of writing a middle grade novel for kids that touches on some of these subjects?
I think I've had ideas about that, and I just never really put any of them down, or really, I don't know. I never really considered it, but I think I would like to actually write something middle grade.
Yeah.
I think right now I'm just kind of focused on the years that I have in my house, even because I have 8, 4, and 1.
Yeah.
So I'm focused on the little ones, but as they get older, maybe I will write a middle grade novel.
Well, that's, your 8-year-old is going to be reading those middle grade novels really soon. And that's what made me think that maybe this is an inspiration.
Yeah. He's already, he's starting the Boxcar Children, and he's read through literally all the Magic Tree House.
Awesome.
Books. So yeah, he's getting there.
Hey, I wanted to take a moment just to recognize you. We just kind of glossed over it. You mentioned that you had fostered a young person who's now an adult, and I just want to say thank you, because I think there's so many families, so many kids out there. 370,000 kids are in foster care on average every day here in the United States, and of course millions around the world, that you would take the time to welcome somebody that needed a forever home into your home and make them part of your family is a beautiful thing. I wanted to acknowledge that and thank you for doing that.
Well, you're welcome. I always feel awkward when people say that it's such a great thing to do. I always feel it is a great thing. I'm not saying it's not. It's just awkward to get praise, right?
Well, and that makes perfect sense knowing you. It's I want to acknowledge it, but in acknowledging it too, I just also hope that it might inspire somebody that's listening to make the same choice you did.
There are a ton of kids in the foster system, and I would say so my husband and I were unable to have children for 12 years when we were first married. And that was kind of the motivator. We became foster to adopt parents. We went through the training through local social services and adopted a teenager. So I was super young, and I was 25 and I had a 13-year-old.
Uh-huh.
And his legal birth certificate actually says that I was 12 when he was born. Uh-huh. And his dad was 17. So we were young. We were, of course, it wasn't biological. That's just what they put your actual age at the time the child was born on their birth certificate when you adopt them. So, I will say it was a learning process. Learn a lot. There are so many kids though that are, in the system, and I would encourage anybody not only to adopt if you're able to, or foster if you're able to, but make sure you try to do it through social services.
Right. And
I say that because I feel like so many people do private adoptions that are through all these other, companies, and they're great. You can actually do it for free through social services.
Yeah.
Social services will pay for the adoption. And they'll even, put a child on insurance, and they'll cover their insurance. They'll cover the cost of a lot of things in the adoption. Yeah. So it's not as expensive as people think it is, I think.
Right. Yeah. And it's a gift that will make your heart full for the rest of your life. Yeah. So thank you for that. We should tell people where they can go to find out more about the Gnomes of Fibberton and also find out more about you.
So my website is fibberton.com. I have Facebook. We have an Instagram. There's a TikTok, if that's a thing anymore. I don't, is that existing anymore? I think it went down and came back up.
It went down and came back up, and who knows what's going to happen in the future.
I don't know. So there is a Gnomes of Fibberton TikTok. We even have a YouTube page, which I didn't even mention in the book. This is a sing-along book too.
Oh, great.
So about 6 or 7 pages in, somewhere like that. Early on in the book, there's a QR code on one of the pages. And if you scan the QR code, it pops up a link to a music video that is on our website. And it's on YouTube, the Gnomes of Fibberton video. And you can sing along with the gnomes.
Awesome.
So a little bit more like of the fun side of the book.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like a lot of fun. And we're going to encourage everybody to check it out. We've had a great time speaking to the author of the Gnomes of Fibberton. Our guest has been Becky Bell. Becky, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
We hope you've enjoyed this episode of Reading with Your Kids and will join us for the next exciting episode of the show. In the meantime, we'd love it if you could connect with us on social media, facebook.com/readingwithyourkids, at Reading With Your Kids on Instagram, and at Gently Magic on X. We'd love for you to visit our YouTube channel, youtube.com/readingwithyourkids. You can find all of our Drawing With Your Kids and our STEM is Family Fun videos on our YouTube channel. And of course, we'd love it if you visit our website, readingwithyourkids.com. You can check out our blog and send us a message. There's a contact button up at the top of the page. We'd love to hear what you love about Reading With Your Kids. We need to hear what you think we can be doing better on the show, and we'd especially love to know who you would like to hear on a future episode of Reading With Your Kids. And if you are an author, please be sure to click the Authors Click Here button up at the top of the page. That way you can find out how you can be a guest. Being a guest is a great, fun, easy way to let thousands of Kidlit fans all over the world know all about your beautiful children's book. And you can also find out about our very affordable and very effective promotional services. I want to thank the folks who made today's show so wonderful, starting with our guest, Kate Shooltz. Please be sure to check out Kate the Earthling. And also want to thank Becky Bell for coming on to celebrate the Gnomes of Fibberton. I want to thank my team, Fatima Khan, Chris Doherty, Rory Grady. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. Most of all, we all want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next episode of Reading with Your Kids.